Welcome to Creamer Media's Polity. I'm Amy Witherden. I am at the offices of Werksmans in Sandton to meet with Dave Walker to talk about concerns over long-term electricity supply and the viability of South African mines. Dave, you have expressed some concern over the future of South African mines in light of the current electricity supply challenges. Please outline these problems.
I think in order to outline the challenges, one needs to go back 2 or 3 years. You'll remember in 2008 we had an electricity crisis, we had load shedding. I think the South African mines bore the brunt of that crisis at that time.
Definitely.
What happened was the mines were asked to cut back on their production, they were asked to reduce their power consumption by 10, 15, up to 20% almost overnight. And that resulted in a lot of the mines having to either close down operations because they couldn't leave people underground, because they didn't have ventilation for them, or they had to close down their furnaces, which is just as substantial a problem. So I think the mines undertook a great deal of work at that point in time to be able to resolve things. What then happened was we had the economic crisis, which resulted in a slowdown in the economy, which resulted in a slowdown in the demand for mining products. But now that that's coming right, I think the mines are in a situation where they are very much worried about how they're going to have a reliable access to electricity over the next 4 or 5 years in order to fund their expansion and in fact their existing operations.
As production increases in line with economic recovery, how can mines ensure that production continues when national power supply is uncertain?
Well, obviously we have the Eskom options, where Eskom is undertaking substantial rebuild and new build programs, so that's the one option. If there's insufficient funds for Eskom to be able to fund those, obviously Eskom could sell off equity stakes in some of those power plants. So that I think is the first option. The second option that a lot of the mining companies are starting to look at is whether they can build their own power generation capacity and in fact build their own power plants to supply their own mines. And I think the third alternative is the independent power producers, who would come in and set up independent power production stations, and they would then supply that electricity through into the national grid.
You also point out 3 obstacles to electricity production. What are these?
I think the 3 obstacles are, firstly, the fairly complex approval process that one has to go through in order to get approval to establish a plant. One needs environmental approvals, one needs power production approvals, and that can take quite a while. It can take up to 2 years to get those approvals. So any new projects that are proposed now will only come online in many years in the future. The second problem I see is the fact that government is in a situation now where it's not sure who should be buying any electricity from these independent power producers. Clearly they don't want to be selling that power to Eskom, so government is in the process of setting up some form of independent entity that would buy that power from both Eskom and the independent power producers. But that seems to be a process which will take many months. As far as I'm aware, government is saying that process should be finished by June this year. I think it's an optimistic timeline.
How is that meant to work?
Well, essentially, what the independent power producers are very concerned about the fact that they would be selling their power to Eskom because they would be direct competitors of Eskom. So government is proposing to set up an entity, which would be a separate company, which would essentially buy power from both Eskom and the independent power producers, and that entity would then distribute the power into the national grid. How it will work we don't know, because government hasn't really released any details. The latest I've heard is that that entity could either be a subsidiary of Eskom, which I don't think will work, or it could be an independent entity independent of Eskom, which I think it's going to have to be. But the details simply haven't been made available. We've simply received high-level news from government.
You say in your statement that the competitiveness of South African mining is under threat. How so?
I think the mines in South Africa are facing a couple of issues at the moment. First of all, we have a relatively strong rand at the moment, and we have had for quite a while, which obviously you've got South African mining companies who have costs escalating on a rand basis and in accordance with rand inflation rates, and at the same time you have them generating their income in dollars, where the rand dollar rate is fairly strong for the rand. Obviously the amount of income they get for selling their product is less than it would be if the rand were weaker. So that's one of the problems they have. The second is they have the 25-26% increases which have been approved by NERSA in the electricity tariffs. So they're going to have very substantial increases in their South African costs, whereas at the same time they won't be able to recover those in terms of the agreements they have with their clients. And I think the third problem they have is that they are in a situation where they're not sure whether there's enough electricity to be able to sustain their operations going into the future. There are government approaches at the moment to try and get rid of the preferred supply agreements that are in place between Eskom and a couple of the mines, on the basis that it's not in the national interest to have mines being supplied with electricity on a preferred basis. The mines, however, would say that we are one of the key clients of government. You have mines that are paying up to R1 billion a year for their electricity consumption, and they would say we can't just rely on the normal distribution system. We need some kind of guarantee that we will actually have electricity, because if we can't plan our production, we can't take long-term orders from our clients, and we can't plan our future production increases. So they have a couple of challenges at the moment that they need to deal with.
But how soon would these challenges need to be resolved if the mining industry in South Africa is going to remain viable?
I would think that the government acknowledges that there's a very narrow window of opportunity within which to address these things. I think government is working very hard together with Eskom to try and bring independent power producers online. I think there have been a couple of statements in the press over the last few days about possible agreements between Eskom and independent power producers. I would imagine that unless things speed up and unless all of these issues are addressed in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to have the mines having very substantial concerns about the future.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.